Sarah Bumgardner with AFMA, the American Armed Forces Mutual Aid Association. For more than 144 years, we have been serving our military community with the support and resources they need to enjoy a financially secure life. And as a director of partnership and member engagement, I talk with other nonprofit organizations who are supporting the military community we all serve. And today we're going to be talking about the Exceptional Family Member Program, known as EFMP. And I have Michelle Norman here. She is a Navy spouse of over 25 years and has a 19-year-old daughter with cerebral palsy and other medical diagnoses. And Michelle quickly realized that there is a gap in support and advocacy for military families with children with disabilities. And so she did something about it. And she created an amazing organization called Partners in Promise. And I am so thankful that you're here today, Michelle. And I'm really excited to talk to you about your organization and about your mission.
Thank you so much for having me today, Sarah, and for your kind words. And I'm so grateful for our partnership with AFMA and the support that you guys provide for our military and veteran families. So thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you kind of tell our membership and just anybody a little bit about how you came to found Partners in Promise? What's your family story?
Well, fantastic. Thanks for letting me share a little bit about us. Partners in Promise, we were founded by myself and 3 military spouses who also have children who receive special education services. And so we came together because of our shared experiences and our desire to kind of really understand if our negative experiences navigating special education within this highly mobile military lifestyle were unique to just us. And so my family's story took front stage and center, as you can say, when I testified in front of the House Armed Services Committee, Military Personnel Subcommittee back in March of 2020, right before like the pandemic really shut down the world. And that hearing was specific on DOD's program, the Exceptional Family Member Program, which we refer to as EFMP, and what challenges I had experienced as a military parent with a child with special needs. And what was different about my testimony that day is that it really centered on special education experience. When people think of EFMP, they think of this great DoD program that ensures that wherever a family is stationed, that they have medical care available to them. So we call that like assignment coordination. And that has really been the main focus of this program. So when I was able to speak to special education, it was like, whoa, we didn't realize that the education piece was also important to EFMP. A little bit of background, my daughter was born very early. She's 19 and has several disabilities. And she really had a pretty good educational experience with 4 moves during her elementary school years. But we really had a rough PCS from one school district in Virginia to another. She has an IEP, which we call an individualized education program. And so every time that you move, you are to receive comparable services in the next location so that child can still access an education. And so the new school typically rewrites the IP with these offerings that they provide in the new school setting. So for us, during that last move, there were a lot of red flags that we experienced within those first, few months of transition. And, there's a typical, back and forth the first month or so, but it got to the point where my daughter was really regressing academically and socially. And it's that mother gut, that gut that there's something wrong here. Something's not right. And of course, at that time, I wasn't really knowledgeable about special education law, and it's a military family. I think we tend to just trust authority and really not question things. And so I really wasn't a squeaky wheel initially. But after seeing my daughters really struggle so fast, so quickly, and seeing her IEP not being implemented, I looked for help. And that's where part of the problem was, is that there was no help to be found. Nowhere, not through the EFMP program. And so, and by the way, of course, my husband's gone during this time. He's going through a very, very arduous nuclear training program for the Navy. So he was gone for like a year and a half. And so I felt very alone. During that time, we were able to scrap funds and was able to get a local special education advocate, but that quickly escalated to needing a special education attorney. which by the way, there were none locally. They're, of course, 3 hours away because of just where we were, living. And so after years of trying to work on a solution, filing complaints, we filed for a due process for my daughter to receive a FAPE, which is a free appropriate public education. And that is required by federal law. And under the law, there's very specific protections for families who are going through dispute resolution process. And the end of the story is, this whole process, this legal challenge lasted 6 years.
Oh my.
Included due process complaint, an appeal to the federal district court, non-compliance on the part of the school district, on and on. The school district turned around and sued my daughter. We won all these fights, but I always thought to myself, first of all, it's taken a toll on my family. But then how can an enlisted family do this? We were fortunate to be able to find the resources. But, with 80% of our military is enlisted, this is not right. How could they have fought this fight that we fought? And so I knew we need to do something. Partners in Promise came together to kind of think of what can we do? How can we equip these families to be better prepared and they don't have to go through what we did with our daughter? So I'll tell you, when we did that hearing back in 2020, there was anecdotal evidence, that there's problems with special education, but there really wasn't any data to be found. And so I think that's where we kind of looked at this, like this is an opportunity for us, to kind of gauge what's going on in this military service organization space. And so we conducted like our very first survey back in the day. It was like a Google form, very simple. And it showed that, yes, we were on to something. And then so from the last 3 years, we really, hit the road with the surveys. Now we are partnering with The Ohio State University. We're collecting data that is fantastic work with our IRB and research team, quantitative, qualitative, everything that we can do to understand what this lived experience of a military special education family is. And so that's kind of how we ended up to be, a research informed, data informed solutions, because that's the thing. We don't want to complain. We want to have solutions that go, with this research so that we can make this military life easier for families who are navigating special ed.
Yeah, it's so impressive, what you've kind of done through your own experience, right? Taking 6 years to fight for your daughter, and doing that in a military community. So I was a military spouse for 11 years, and you're alone a lot, right? You're doing everything kind of by yourself. You're moving by yourself and you're taking kids by yourself. And then having an added stressor of, I can't get the education that my child needs because they aren't being met, adds to that. And so then turning around and doing something tangible to be able to help others is just, it's wonderful. And it's so impressive and commendable. And I think you're so right in the fact that it sounds like, the EFMP program it's there and it was established, but it was a little bit under the radar. People weren't noticing it or noticing the gaps in it. And that's where data comes into play, right? Because to make change, we have to prove that there needs to be a change. Even though we know in our gut that it needs to happen and how our family's doing this, we have to have the data in it. And like you said, you guys kind of started doing that. But just recently, right, you guys conducted a survey, and I would love to know kind of what those findings were. You went out to EFMP families and ask them some questions. Right. And so what were kind of the big takeaways from that?
So we have several findings from this survey. And in this survey this year kind of focused on the middle of that special education journey, because previously we have looked at the very end of the journey where you're filing complaints and due process. And then we had some at the very beginning of like looking at someone who's trying to determine how does my child have a disability, getting a diagnosis, being eligible, that type thing. So this one was kind of focusing on the middle, like what's really happening in this gap here. And so what we looked at first is 4 elements, really. How do military parents play a role in achieving long-term outcome goals? Because that's really kind of like what we want to do, right? Our kids to graduate from high school, go get a job, go to college, whatever it might be, but just keeping those post-secondary opportunities open for them. Looking at these IEPs and 504 plans, are they helping them get to that, point? I know a lot of them are focused on annual goals, but are they helping them get to that end goal? And then we looked at different benchmarks, such as, again, graduating with a standard diploma. That's so huge for our families. And sometimes we move so much, it's hard to keep your eye on on really what the goal is like making sure that you get those credits, to be able to do things, even join the military. And then also standardized testing, that's something that, if a family kind of times it right, they may never get standardized tests if they're moving every couple
Yeah.
years. And sometimes they're only done in certain states at third grade and fifth grade and eighth
Yeah.
grade. It is possible that somehow they're falling through the cracks. So we wanted to kind of like look at all of these different benchmarks. The first one that we found is really connected to when a child is first found eligible. That there's a diagnosis. Are they going to, have a 504 plan or an IEP? And so we asked our families, does the school even recognize the diagnosis, and do they recognize the educational impact? Because that really is the difference between an IEP and a 504. You get specially designed instruction with an IEP. 504 has more accommodations. So the good news is that 74% of our families say that the school district during the 2021-22 school year did recognize the child's diagnosis. But when we asked that question about the educational impact, it was only 63% of the families reported that. So why does this matter? If a student's disability is not fully recognized by a school, our parents are feeling less supported. There may be disagreements, at the table of like, well, no, this child really has XYZ, and there's not that support for that.
Right.
Interesting. It's a lot of kids with ADHD and mental health diagnoses, maybe scoring really high, perhaps, doing great in their grades, but
Right.
maybe having meltdowns at home because, right, they're just not getting the help that they need. And so these are interesting things for us as we look at, the best program to support these kiddos. And again, it's up to that parent to kind of really, see it through. The finding too that we looked at was IEPs. IEPs, again, look at those annual goals.
Yep.
But we asked our families, do you even have a long-term educational goal? And I guess the good thing is that 88% of our families do. They should all be graduating with a high school diploma, but we understand that, there are some diagnoses where maybe it's just socializing or being on grade level or whatnot. But we are seeing relationships, when you do have that long-term goal, you're able to advocate better for your IEPs to make sure that you're meeting the benchmarks that you need to.
Right.
And it could be that because we move so often and there's not a set of eyes, like the same school district watching that child, that maybe IEPs are just not made for these highly mobile people like us. We are just moving on the go all the time, and there's not that continuity. And when that continuity, who is it? It's the parent. And so
Yep.
there's just a lot of pressure back on the parent that we're finding. Finding number 3, we talked about a little about those common benchmarks and outcomes. So the majority of our kids are taking standardized tests, 63%. It really should be up to like 95% because that's what federal guidelines are. Some interesting things we're finding out. We asked if your child didn't participate, why? 23% said it's because they were not eligible due to their special education status. And that's a problem because everyone should be taking it.
Right.
Only 1% of kiddos can take alternate tests if they feel like the standardized test, depending on what their diagnosis is. But only 1% of that population should be pushed to the alternative testing. But everyone else should be taking it because we need to have a gauge on how they're doing. Are they in grade level? Are they going to be able to get the credits that they need? So when you see 23%, we don't know. We just need more data. Our school districts knowing you're moving again, and you don't want to say this, but is it going to bring the numbers down, for that particular school district? And so we just need to know more about why all kids are not taking these standardized. And I know that there are states that are like, oh, we don't want to standardize this, but we need to have some type of benchmark. You cannot just go through grade to grade to grade and not know where you stand with your peers. And so that is something that we want to make sure our kids are not falling through the cracks. Another finding we found out is that high school diploma. I wanted to see that number to be a little bit higher. 58% of our participants said they're on track to receive a standard diploma. So that's good, 58%. And they had long-term goals. When we asked those who don't have long-term goals, only 30% were on track, to graduate. And so we need to be setting the bar here and then having that family always asking when they move and move and move, like, hey, are they taking standardized tests? Are they on track to graduate? I think we get so busy in our military lifestyle that we kind of forget to ask the obvious. And so that was an interesting little step. My last stat, and this is it.
No, this
Still did
is great. It's the data. It's how
I know
change
it's like so much
comes.
data. It's like, oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
it's
But
what
this
it
one
all
is,
means.
I know I'm just throwing it out there. This one's really good because this talks about the experiences military families and their desire to serve. So it's a bittersweet finding. 78% of our families reported negative impacts of stress based on special education journeys that they're going through. EFMP did not help. The whole enrolling in EFMP actually elevated the impact of the stress.
Huh.
However, it did not have a significant impact on their desire to continue to serve. And that is crazy to me. So what it means is that we need to really support these military families in EFMP because they're not going anywhere.
Yep.
There are some great things, healthcare that you can get in the military. I mean, they want to be here. So it's even more, we need to really step up the ball and really help these families because they're here for the end game.
Yeah.
And again, so much stress. It's kind of one of those areas that we need to probably look into as far as partnering with different organizations or within DoD, the Chaplain Corps, whatever it means, because they are going through a lot. And because they're such a unique population, there hasn't been a lot of awareness of what they're going through. So how can we better support them? So that is like the top of the findings from this year. You can see how it just really fills in of like what this process is for our families. And it really gives us good feedback of like, well, what do we need to do, to help them thinking about their goals, thinking about graduation, making sure that there's not any of these issues, at the very beginning of the IEP process. So anyway, I know you probably have questions. So
I do. I've got so many questions. But one of the ones that I have is after all this data, right? And that you've been able to collect this information. And one of the most important things that you said is that the families are experiencing this stress. They're aware they're experiencing this stress. Enrolling and having a child within EFMP is actually making it more stressful, but they're still there and they're there for the long haul. So like they have to be supported. This community has to have a voice. It has to be supported. So after, all of this data that's come in, kind of what are the next steps for Partners in Promise to kind of address these findings and to help these families?
We have many steps, but I think there's a lot of moving pieces too.
Mm-hmm.
So the most important thing that if anyone had tuned into our webinar last week, is that the DOD, the Department of Defense, is coming out with a new EFMP instruction. We call it a DODI. This was mandated from the 2021 NDAA that they were to improve the EFMP program, standardize the processes across the service branches since it's uneven in one location versus another location. It's coming out this spring. And so we're super excited and just waiting to see this plan to see how that's going to improve this process. Is there, are there eyes on the special education piece or is it just the medical? So I think we need to kind of wait and see what improvements are coming to the program. And then so we can maybe fill in those gaps along the way. From our data this year, we know we need to, equip our parents more so that they can strengthen those IEPs along the way. How do we, work with educators to smooth these transitions for military families? Are they aware that we're not there very long? So get that IEP very quickly and try to implement it as quickly as possible. DoD, for instance, also our families work with lots of service providers. We're working with school liaison officers, EFMP staff. We have people at military treatment facilities. Maybe they need training checklists to be able to check in with these families and say, I see that your kid has a 504 or an IEP. Are they on track to get a high school diploma? Are they taking standardized tests? How do we look at this holistically? And so we're kind of just waiting on this DoDI to kind of figure out where we can step in and fill it. I do know that from our data that we see that there are still families that are not knowledgeable about protections and benefits from different programs. They are not knowledgeable about parts of special education law. So we're going to step up this year. We're going to, we've developed a IEP and EFMP binder that we're going to be providing digitally, and then also providing training to military families to understand how to utilize this binder. But from the day one of finding out your child has a diagnosis or that you've enrolled in EFMP, this binder, which of course I'm old school, so I'm gonna have to print it out because that's just the way I am. I know the new people are like, okay, I'm just going to put it on a PDF, but it will step them every step of the way, from having your orders into your IEPs and your transfer IEP and sample letters of requests for different things. It's going to take you all the way to post educational opportunities. So if you're looking to go into the workplace, vocational education,
Yeah.
these are the type of things that we're going to be providing them all the information that they might need during the special education journey. So we're very, very excited. Our website's getting updated at thepromisetoact.org. So we hope people can come there and visit and see all the different contents that we created just from the data and where we're seeing the gaps of knowledge from our families.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of that binder, right? Of,
It's good.
how can we, and as kind of in this military community, right? We're always thinking, how do we engage our membership? How do we engage the military community as a whole? And most importantly, how do we just spread information, right? Because that's how
Right.
people make change. That's how people are informed. And so it kind of leads me to, where can somebody go if they are a family and maybe they're a little bit nervous, or maybe there's a stigma associated with having to be in the EFMP? Where can they go to get help through Partners in Promise to find that kind of, you're not alone. There is a checklist. There is help. There are these binders. Tell me
That's
about
right. You're absolutely right, because it's so important to have a tribe,
that.
because it can be very isolating when you're caring for a very medically complex child. And
Mhm.
so finding the people that get you, that get what you're going through, is so important. So we always tell people, come find us. We are on social, Partners in Promise on social, everywhere from Facebook to LinkedIn, Instagram. But our website has a contact us to get onto our newsletter so that you can be updated about these great new resources. And also we have blogs that kind of share and elevate other EFMP family stories. And so that's the first place. Come check us out. And for our partners out there, just say, support our families. Look who's invited at the table of conversations of military families, and make sure there's boots on the ground representation of those in the EFMP program. Because sometimes it's an afterthought of like, oh, we got all these people talking about military kids and family, like, oh, who's representing the children with disabilities? And so it's part of that DEI conversation, but no one really talks about the disability piece of being inclusive or diverse. We need to kind of get them to the table and support us. I think, as far as that caregiver stress, we got to figure out some more partnerships there to make sure that they're getting the support that they need. We are an all volunteer military spouse organization. So we always ask people, if you love what we're doing, donate or sponsor some of maybe these trainings or digital binders for military families, so that they can have them in their hands, and will make their journey that much smoother and easier as they continue to serve this great country. So come find us. We're happy. And then, of course, when our survey comes out again next year, we have so much data. This is one of 4 reports that is coming out this month.
Wow.
We're also going to do homeschooling. We're going to look at adults in the EFMP program, because they get overlooked a lot. And then we're going to also look at the service providers and educators that took our survey, and look at their qualitative findings, because they had a lot of things to say. So we have a lot of reports coming out. We're going to do some trainings, some binders, update our website. Come be a part of Partners in Promise team and a part of our family. And hopefully we can just support them. This is wonderful military adventure that we are in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I thank you so much for being here today, for talking about the EFMP kind of journey and the lifestyle, and bringing awareness to it so that other service members and military spouses and, families can understand a little bit more about this, and understand, how can we help? How can we support? How can we make sure we're bringing them to the table, that they're not being overlooked? And you have all these really exciting things with, this new data that's coming out, and, and kind of diving into that. So I really thank you so much, Michelle, for what you did in first starting the organization, of course, and your dedication to it, but for being here, and for talking about it, and for kind of moving forward. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, for having us. And anytime we can help you guys elevate what you're doing, we are here to support our military and veteran families. So thank you so very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I thank everybody today for joining. We will see everyone here in a few weeks for our next LinkedIn Live. Of course, in the meantime, you can find us here through our AFMA subscription if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date on information like this. And I look forward to seeing everyone next time. And thank you for the opportunity to serve. Bye now.